Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of You and My Boro with myself, Scott Wilson, and Dom Shaw from the Northern Echo. We're in the middle of pre-season. We've had a couple of domestic games. I was at the win over Bolton at Bishop, and Dom was at Gateshead last night watching Boro win there. So we'll have a chat about that. We'll kind of wrap up where the squad's looking on the back of those two pre-season matches. We'll look at maybe what gaps still need filling. And then obviously we'll look ahead to the three games that remain. Everything good, Dom? How was the International Stadium?
Good, yeah, good. It was my second visit. I've done two pre-season games so far, both
You're
at the
a regular.
International Stadium. Yeah, I'm going to say it now. I've already bored you to death with this. Gateshead are a good team.
Yeah, you
banged that. They were quality. I thought they were really good on Wednesday night. Before the game against Boro, they'd scored 18 goals in 4 games. And beat Sunderland and beat a Sunderland team, contain the likes of Jack Clark, Joe Bellingham, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know my record and history of tips on here is pretty useless compared to yours, and I know there's the background of what's going on at Gateshead and why they couldn't go up last year, but I think they're a good tip to be successful in the National League.
You're saying Gateshead for the National League. Well, there we go.
I was Bishop. I was Bolton at Bishop.
Bolton didn't really look like League One winners. Well, to be fair, that's a bit harsh. Bolton. For the first half of the game, there was nothing in it really. Bolton probably matched Boro. The key difference in terms of the game was the fact that when Boro made 9 changes on the hour mark, they were bringing on Emmanuel Latalaf.
Yeah.
Johnny, first team players who will be part of that first team squad next season. Bolton clearly weren't. And so for the last half hour, Boro absolutely ran away with it. Could have scored as many as they like, really. But no, the first half was much tighter. Right, but let's get into it. Let's have a chat then about these two pre-season matches and kind of where it leaves Boro. What are we now? Just over a fortnight away from the start of the season. Let's do it position by position, because that probably rather than kind of game by game, because obviously, as we always say, the results in these matches don't really matter. So we'll do it position by position. So keeper first, and the keeper position is probably where there's been the most change so far, if you like. So Zach Hemming played in the second half at Bishop, actually made a couple of really good saves in the second half to keep Boro's clean sheet against Bolton. But he's gone now. He's gone to Leyton Orient on a season-long loan. Obviously, that's where Sol Brynn was last year. Sol Brynn missed the game at Bishop, but was back last night. So we've got Brynn. We've got obviously Seny Dieng, who we fully expect to start the season as number 1. We've also got Tom Glover, who didn't feature at Bishop, but did start against Gateshead. You spoke to Michael Carrick after the Gateshead game, didn't you, Dom, specifically about keepers? So what did he have to say, and what's your reading of who's going to be number 1, who's going to be number 2, who's going to be number 3? Because obviously there's no Jamie Jones either now.
Well, it's been an interesting week, hasn't it? Because this time last week, if we'd have sat and had this conversation, Boro would have had 5 keepers on the books, and the expectation at that stage was that Jamie Jones was going to stay and sign a new deal. Now, obviously, he left, opted to go to Salford, and you spoke to Carrick about that on Saturday, and Carrick said that doesn't change your transfer plans or doesn't change Boro's plans.
Which I thought was quite interesting, to be fair.
Yeah. Then Hemming obviously went to Leyton Orient on loan. Hemming's got 2 years left on his contract, so when he comes back next summer, he'll still have a year left. Obviously, Leyton Orient is where Brynn impressed last season. So that leaves Dieng, Glover and Brynn, as you said. And I said to Carrick, I asked Carrick last night, will Sol Brynn be sticking around this season? And he categorically said, yeah, Sol is going nowhere. He's done tremendously well out on loan. Leyton Orient last season, Swindon the year before that. He's going nowhere. He's here, and he's going to train with us and push to play, were his words. So kind of obvious next question is, well, where does that leave Tom Glover, for example, or Seny Dieng? And Carrick said, well, we've got 3 really good goalkeeper options. Still doesn't sit quite right, does it? Because none of those keepers are going to be happy to be number 3. Now, I know the kind of keeper positions changed. You're looking at Mikel Arteta in the Premier League rotating his keepers. I might be wrong. I can't see a position where we're going to have a rotating number 2 at Boro. Now, Dieng, unless things are changing, which there's no indication it is, Dieng's expected to be number 1 this season. If they're keeping Brynn around, that suggests he's going to be number 2, because they wouldn't want to risk halting his rapid progression by having a year as being third choice in the travelling reserve. So I guess the Carrick's admission in midweek that Sol Brynn is staying around just raises fresh uncertainty over Tom Glover's future, doesn't it, in position. Glover obviously played the full 90 minutes on Wednesday night, did well, because as I said, Gateshead were good and created chances. Glover did well. Brynn, Carrick said, will play next Wednesday. He obviously had that slight foot niggle, so he was on the bench last night. It seems he's not going to play on Saturday. Maybe Dieng will play then. He's going to play next Wednesday at Harrogate. And then we'll see how things progress. I think we've alluded to it before. It still feels like the most likely outcome is Glover moving on. But then, what do you do with a number 3? Do you have a young lad there who steps up, or, despite what Carrick said at the weekend, do you look at maybe like an experienced free transfer option later in the window? It's we've clearly got a lot more clarity in the last few weeks, but in the last week, sorry. In the last few days even, but there's still some unanswered questions there, isn't there, and some uncertainty.
Yeah, I'm with you though. That I think it still feels like the likeliest scenario is Dieng as number 1, Brynn as number 2, and Glover leaving. In which case, I think Boro then look at an experienced old hand from the lower leagues who will quite happily come to Boro and effectively be a training goalkeeper, but be there if the worst came to the worst. I still think that's, for all that, as you said, Carrick, said to me after the game at the weekend, it doesn't really change our plans. Well, yeah, that's fine while Glover's still here, but is Glover really going to be happy being third choice, or is that going to then become an issue, which you don't really need amongst your goalkeeping department, do you? You know what I mean? I'm with you. I think the only reason you keep Brynn is because he's one of you. He's either number 1 or number 2. You don't keep Brynn to be number 3. Glover's obviously in a different stage of his career. You haven't invested as much kind of time and effort into his development as you clearly have with Brynn all the way through the academy. So yeah, it probably does feel like he would be the one whose position would be likeliest to change. But I guess that's a case of watch this space. Defence, and again, you spoke to Michael Carrick specifically about the defence on the back of the last night's game. I mean, of all the positions in the squad, maybe of all the teams in the Championship, Boro's defensive options, particularly central defensive options, I mean, they're right up there with the absolute best in the league, aren't they?
Well, I said to Carrick on Wednesday night. You've got 4 central defenders who probably strengthen any other Championship team, or certainly the majority of other Championship teams, and that's without taking into account Johnny Howson, who played centre half for the first hour on Wednesday night.
I played centre half for Bishop as well, when he came on.
Fullback kind of looks after itself, I think, for now, doesn't it? Dijksteel played last night for the first hour, but Aylin's going to be the first choice right back this season, and as things stand, obviously, Bangura injury, uncertainty of how long he's going to be out, whether anyone else comes in. Lucas Engel, as things stand, is the starting left back.
I'll just jump in on the fullbacks, because I know we said in a previous vid Dijksteel might well leave. I think that's a lot less likely now, given that Smith's not going to be right for the start of the season, which we obviously didn't know earlier in the summer. I think the fact that Carrick said both Tommy Smith and Marcus Forss, we'll get to the Forss situation in a minute, they're not going to be right for the start of the season. And he didn't spell it out, but I think the indication was they're not even necessarily going to be banging on the door for the start of the season. We might be talking September, October for them quite easily. Well, that means you keep Dijksteel for at least the first half of the season, doesn't it?
Yeah, because what's your alternative? Jones, but we haven't seen Jones playing right back in the back 4. And Vandenberg. Well, Vandenberg played last year, but regardless of what your options are at centre half, you want Vandenberg at centre back. He's your best centre back, isn't he? At the minute, you want him at centre back. So I think that's I think that makes sense. It's centre half, isn't it? So obviously Darrell Lenihan comes back, scores at Gateshead on Wednesday night. Dale Fry was missing. Carrick said that was just a niggle, now to worry about. Saturday might come too soon, but it's nothing. It's nothing to be concerned about. So you've got Vandenberg, Clark, Lenihan, Fry. I still think, just because of how impressive they were at the end of last season, Vandenberg and Clark are your first choice too. But then, Darrell Lenihan is a top-end Championship centre-half. And Dale Fry the same when Fry's at his best, isn't it? Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And it's going to be interesting to see how the pecking order plays out, if and when they're all fit, I think. Say a month into the season, they're all fit. And who? Carrick would say, won't he, there's no such thing as first choice centre-half. But if they're playing Leeds at home and all the 4 centre-halves are fit, who are the 2 that start?
And the other issue with that as well is that, yes, in 3-game weeks, he might well change a centre-half, but it's not like a winger, say, where if you're sat on the bench as a winger, you know, in this kind of modern era where there's 5 subs, you're probably expecting that come the hour mark, you've got a pretty good chance of going on. If you're sat there as a centre half, you're only coming on if there's a problem with one of the 2 on the pitch, aren't you? It's not like if you're 3rd or 4th choice centre half, well, you're going to be getting minutes anyway, which you will as an attacking player.
And midfield's equally as fascinating, really, isn't it? Because you've got 5 players there. Lon McCabe impressed again in pre-season from everything we've heard and been told on and off the record. Obviously Dan Barlaser, Hayden Hackney and Johnny Howson who were there, and then Aidan Morris coming in as well. And Morris looks like a real athlete, doesn't he? It's my first glimpse of him last night. He's going to be able to handle himself in the Championship, isn't he?
Yeah, well, that was exactly it. I got my first glimpse of him, obviously, against Bolton. He played an hour in that game. And I was surprised by kind of how short and stocky he is. That's the first thing. And I was also kind of slightly surprised that he was the one constantly going back and picking the ball up off the back 4 and then turning and either popping it off or looking to get Boro going. I just from the bits I'd seen of him in clips and what I'd kind of read and heard about him, I envisaged him being much more of a kind of 10 than a 6, if you know what I mean. Actually, from the admittedly very limited evidence so far, he's probably looking a little bit more like a 6 and probably a bit more of... He's not the same player as Johnny Howson. He's clearly not that type of player. But you could imagine him playing instead of Howson and giving Boro's midfield a little bit of a look. Whereas before, I was kind of thinking Morris and Howson. Now I'm thinking a bit more Morris and Hackney, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Because we've had the conversation before, haven't we? Like, does Boro's balance look right if you have Hackney and Barlaser in midfield, for example? Whereas Howson and Hackney complement each other nicely.
Yeah.
It feels like that'd be the case with Morris and Hackney as well. The problem there is, how do you dislodge Johnny Howson from the team? And that, again, that's going to be like that spine. I know clearly there's perhaps still a bit of work to be done going forward, and maybe the makeup of the attack isn't quite clear yet. We'll get there. But that spine of the defence and the midfield looks strong, doesn't it? It really does. I thought Hackney was good at Gated on Wednesday night. It almost looked a bit too easy for him at times, and that's absolutely no disrespect to Gated. But, just the way he pops it about, and it's a sign of a good player where they're always in space, or they always seem to find a yard for himself. Well, he did that. He did that on Wednesday night. I thought he looked good, which is a good sign, because you forget, really, because a fair bit's happening transfer-wise, you forget just how much of a boost I think it is to have Hackney back, given that he missed, February onwards, last 3 months, 4 months of the season.
And in fairness, I thought, and again, the last half hour against Bolton was probably a bit deceptive, because Bolton had made a lot of changes and had significantly weakened the standard of their side. But I thought the half hour that Barlaser produced against Bolton, he was probably the best player on the pitch. He played a lovely ball to set a laugh through for the opening goal. He won the penalty for the 3rd goal. And it brings me back to, there was a game last season, I think it was Sheff Wed at home, wasn't it? Where
it was,
and had a load of time on the ball, had the run of the midfield. And when he gets that, he's a really good player, because he's got a pass on him. He's probably the best through ball passer in the Middlesbrough squad. It's just, my view of it is that sometimes in a really tight competitive Championship game, it can all be a bit fast for him. It can all be a bit much for him. He doesn't get that much time on the ball, and he's definitely less effective. But in games when Boro are dominating possession and teams are sitting off them, I still think Barlaser's got something to offer.
His delivery, I mean, he set up the goal last night. I thought it was Gilbert at first, but it wasn't. It was
with a free kick. Yeah, that's right.
Really brilliant cross. Good header by Lenihan, but brilliant cross. And You remember when Barlaser came in?
Kudos to that, by the way, to the Boro admin team who actually got that on video absolutely perfectly, didn't they? I saw you retweet it yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, it couldn't have worked out any better than that.
No, I know. And you forget, don't you, when Barlaser came in that January, was he joint top championship assist chart or
in a poor Rotherham team?
Yeah, in a poor Rotherham team. And I don't think I'm being overly harsh in saying I don't think Boro have seen that. I don't think Boro have seen the best of him. I think Barlaser would admit that for a number of reasons, really. He's been in and out. He hasn't had a settled run in the team. He hasn't had a settled partner at any stage either, has he? So when we're talking there about Howson and Hackney, for a bulk of the 22-23 season, they came as a pair, didn't they? Whereas there isn't really a Barlaser hand, is there? He's had spells with both. And when Morris comes in, the kind of instinctive thought is, that means trouble for Barlaser. There was the Turkey links, obviously, although the kind of indication at the time, strong indication we told, was that there was certainly no bids there. There'd been no contact. A bit of speculation from there, and maybe. But I don't know. Maybe Morris's arrival, McCabe's emergence, gets an extra gear out of Barlaser. I mean, the problem is, who do you leave out? How do you leave out two of Howson, Hackney, and Morris? But still, all he can do is impress in pre-season, and he certainly seems to be doing that.
And I guess the who do you leave out question is probably pertinent to McCabe because, it's the classic, and we'll get to Sonny Finch in a minute as a more attacking player, but we asked Carrick kind of specifically about this, and he kind of, it's the balance, isn't it, between how much do they benefit from stepping up and being a regular part of the first team squad, training every day under Carrick, getting to know what he wants, what he likes, but probably not playing much football, or going to a League One or League Two club and, not having that direct input with the Boro first team squad, but playing every week. It's a question for Finch. It's also, I suspect, going to be a question for McCabe because unless there are major injuries in that central midfield area, for all that he's progressing well and for all that he's looked pretty good in pre-season, for all that Boro's coach and staff clearly like him, realistically, how much football is he likely to play in certainly the first half of next season? If all of Boro's midfielders are fit, I'd argue probably not very much.
And the interesting thing is here, I was writing that Finch stuff because you'd asked him about it and sent me the quote earlier this week. And when you look back since Carrick's arrival, how many young players who've been right there knocking on the first team door, but maybe like are in McCabe's position or Finch's position, have actually gone out on loan? I don't think there are any.
No,
Coburn went out on loan in the back end of the summer window of 2022 before
Coburn and that was pre-Carrick, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now, obviously, the kind of early suggestions last summer was that Coburn was going to go out, but the decision was made there. I think keepers are different because Brynn and Hemming are in a different position. But if you look at the other young players, I don't know, even players like maybe Pharrell Willis, who
that's a good point.
Who kind of knocked on the door. Finch again last year's difficult because he was injured and he was only 17 at the time. But for all, Carrick talks a lot about having to decide what's best for that individual. I think his preference, despite talking about how much he learned from his loan spells, was it at Swindon when he was at West Ham? Yes. I think his preference is to have the young players training with him and working and keeping an eye on him and progressing him and developing him as he wants and including him when I can. Now, I might be wrong. McCabe might well go out on loan. Finch might well go out on loan. But my instinct is he'll keep them both around and develop them.
I think one of the difficulties is you've got to make the decision before you know what your League Cup run's going to be like. Because in the first half of last season, those fringer players with Boro actually became really important because they were playing League Cup games every other week. And
Morgan Rogers, it was the making of Morgan
Rogers. Sammy Silvera got football. It was the making of Latalat to a slight degree as well. Now, if you could say to Michael Carrick now, you're going to get to the quarterfinals of the League Cup again, I suspect he'd keep every player he could because there's going to be an awful lot of games in the first half of the season. You might go and lose at Leeds 3 days into the season, and those fringe players all of a sudden a massive route to the first team is completely cut off to them before the season's even got going. So, that's a fact, an unknown, if you like, that kind of is difficult to factor in. So we mentioned Finch there. So let's go to kind of, wide attackers, number 10s, whatever.
So what was he like at Bishop? Because he came off and made an impact. He came on, and made an impact at Bishop last half an hour.
Finch,
yeah.
Came onto the right of midfield and was really lively. Scored his goal, obviously, to a certain degree, right place, right time. Latalath nodded the corner back. It took it really well, but it just came to him when he popped it in. Probably should have scored a second goal, broke into the right-hand side area, maybe just got a little bit excited and kind of slashed a shot into side netting. But was really lively. More than comfortable coming in off the flank, which is clearly what Carrick wants from the players who play in those kind of wide attacking positions. Looked like he could easily play as a 10 if you needed him to. He could probably play as a 9, but I'm not sure that's where we're going with him at the moment. But yeah, lots of bright sides, and then Carrick really positive afterwards in terms of his ability to be in the right place at the right time, his kind of knack for getting goals, but also just the rate that he's progressing at.
Yeah, and he was really bright and encouraging again last night. Again, playing on that right side. And I think the interesting thing there is, when you look at number 10 on the left side with Azaz, McGree, Bergzorg, 10, again, Azaz, McGree, Bergzorg, Gilbert, there's options there, isn't there? There's competition. Well, on the right side with Force injured, if Jones gets injured, who plays there at the minute? This feels like an opportunity for Finch. Now, from what I gather, Boro are kind of open to the idea of strengthening on the right side if the opportunity presents itself before the window's out, which comes as no surprise, really, after the Force injury update. And that might well have a knock-on effect on what happens with Finch, but his versatility is going to stand him in good stead, isn't it? He can play as a 10, he can play front, he can play right side, and he just scores, doesn't he? Did he get 5 in 5 for the 21s to finish the season last year in Premier League 2? He obviously scored on Saturday. He was bright again on Wednesday night and created a couple of openings. Him and George McCormack, who we didn't touch on, who's had a kind of breakthrough this summer at left back and has came on again on Wednesday night. They're the two who it feels like young lads have really kind of stepped up this summer, doesn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does. McCormack, you would imagine, will depend on what Boro end up doing with a left back now in the wake of the Bangura injury.
Left midfield.
I think Finch stays. I think Finch stays, and I think you're right. I think the fact that Force, he's not going to be around for the foreseeable. I think Finch starts the season as the number 2 to Isaiah Jones, and I think if Isaiah Jones was to get injured in the first game of the season, Carrick wouldn't hesitate about putting Finch on and saying, right, you've got a real chance now.
Well, he really liked
to the left. Sorry, go on.
Just quickly, because, Carrick is reluctant to talk about individuals, isn't he? When you press him on individuals, he quickly shifts it back to the team. But he loves talking about Finch. He's more than happy talking up Finch, isn't he? Like, obviously within reason. He doesn't get carried away. He's only about 18-year-old lad. But you can tell within months of Carrick coming in, Finch 17 is in the first team, is given a chance. He clearly spotted something straight away. I think it's an exciting season for him. And on the left, Bergzorg, McGree, Azaz. Bergzorg looked like a right handful from the clips I saw of the game at Bishop. That's going to be real strength in that department.
And I think it's very early, but when Rodgers left, it kind of coincided with Azaz coming in, didn't it? But the strong message from the club was always Finn Azaz is not a Morgan Rodgers replacement. Finn Azaz is someone we've wanted for a long time. Yeah. We've been watching for a long time. Now was the time to do the deal. He's a completely different player. And I think we've seen that. Bergzorg, to me, looks much more like a new Morgan Rodgers in that he's clearly comfortable coming off that left side. Yeah, he travels with the ball. He looks like he could play up front if you needed him to. He's tall. He's got a bit of physicality to him. I think that that if you're looking at holes in the squad, I think he is the box tick now that we've got a player who genuinely is a replacement for Rodgers.
I thought Azaz looked good he came off the bench only for half an hour, but he was the best player on the pitch by a country mile in the last half an hour. Just like classy touches. There was one chance where he forced a good save from the keeper. I don't know who played the long ball forward, but he kind of took it down brilliantly. You know, the touch where you think, like, how do they make it look so easy doing that? Whereas if you did it, it'd balloon out into the stands. Yeah, I thought he looked good. And Gilbert, there's clearly a decision to be made on Gilbert as well, because he had an encouraging end to last season, didn't he? Because for all we're talking about options there and different and versatile forwards, if Gilbert was to go, would you potentially be running the risk of leaving yourself slightly short of 10 if you see Bergzorg playing more off the left?
Yeah, I was going to say Gilbert's probably your kind of natural replacement for Azaz as a possible 10, isn't he?
I think you're looking like Bergzorg, McGree left, Azaz, Gilbert 10, Jones, Finch right.
Flash force at some stage,
Yeah.
I mean, just before we go to attack, just on force, I mean, that's a worry now, isn't it? Because at the back end of last season, we were never quite certain what was going on and how bad it was. And we're still not really, other than the fact that it's a muscular issue. But the fact that Carrick's kind of saying, he will not be ready. And Tommy Smith, it was always going to be a long term. In some respects, it's not really a surprise that that's stretched over beyond pre-season. I think Fawcett is more of a surprise. And it's got to be a bit of a worry now, hasn't it? That this is rumbling on potentially well into next season.
Yeah, because last season was injury disrupted, putting it nicely, isn't it? Putting it kindly. And it has got to be a concern because I guess on the back of it was a hamstring injury, wasn't it? So on the back of an injury like that, if he's not back in training yet, when he does come back, you've got to nurse him carefully back. And then his game is all about kind of pace and power anyway, isn't it? So the kind of real frustration is for Boro and for Force he's a really good fit for Carrick on that right side, isn't he? We talked about it at the end of last season, but what we've never seen is Force and Jones both fully fit and at the best.
Yeah.
Kind of jostling for position, really, because the year before last, obviously, Jones was going through a really tough time off the pitch. And then last season, when Jones gets back to something like his best, Force is injured. The hope was this year, them two could really get the best out of each other. And now Finch coming back as well. But yeah, we don't know. We don't know when Force is going to be back, when he's going to be ready. It's just a watch this space job on that, isn't it? The kind of hope was certainly, I remember Carrick telling us in September at Southampton when him and Force and McGree were both ruled out, and the very early indications were they were both going to be back for pre-season. Now, obviously, that's been the case for McGree. Force, it's not an exact science, injuries, is it? You can never tell. But it is really frustrating for him. It must be really frustrating for him. Last year was a really frustrating year for Josh Coburn. He seems to have put that behind him. He's back now. Again, as we discussed last week on here, from what we're told, he's caught the eye in pre-season as having a good summer. He knows he's going to go in second in the pecking order behind Latte Lath, but that's a decent pairing to go in with, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, certainly the Bishop game, Lath looked sharp as a tack when he came on. He scored within 6 minutes. He just looked so bright and so on it. I am genuinely excited about what he could do over a full season this year. Coburn's slightly different in that he played the first half when Bolton had their full strength team on, and was up against two big physical classic League One centre halves. Had a couple of sniffs, made a couple of darts, was offside a couple of times, but clearly is back to full fitness, which is the first main thing. I think Lath and Coburn as a two is fine. The worry would be if one of them gets injured for any prolonged period, then the other one is playing every week, week in, week out. And while you've got potential options, Bergzorg could play there. We've said Finch could play there. It's kind of like it was in the first half of last season where Rodgers had to play up front, where actually that's not really what they're probably best at. No. It still, to me, feels like you're probably a genuine out-and-out striker short. The problem is if Lath stays fit and is anywhere near the player that he was in the last couple of months of last season, you're bringing in a striker who is probably battling with Josh Coburn to be number 2 and actually might not play very much football at all. So the level of striker you're going to be able to bring in to fit that role is probably not the level of striker you need if you're actually going to have to play them every week, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and we touched on it last week, didn't we? From what we gather, Boro are still open to in the market to bring in a centre forward if they can before the window's out. But it's similar to January in that they know what they want, they know who they want, and if they can't get what and who they want, then what they won't go is chasing around. Now, obviously, things do open up late in the window, so there might be certain options that maybe aren't seen as options now that do become options later in the window. But yeah, as things stand, that's certainly the indication we're getting, and that they were willing to be patient on that front. Again, that was when they brought in the kind of early flurry of signings, all the indications were right. Yeah, we're looking at strengthening the attack if we can, but we know that this one might take time, so we might have to kind of bide our time with it a little bit. So we'll see how that plays out. Donny on Saturday, Harrogate next week, Heerenveen to wrap things up, and then it all gets underway.
It is. We're rattling through. Yeah, we're rattling through. And as I say, as you say, Donny on the weekend, Harrogate next week. We'll maybe try and do a live vid at the back end of next week after those 2 games before the Heerenveen game. And then obviously once Heerenveen's out the way, we're in the run up to the season. We'll be back to the regular schedule of a couple of vids a week. Once the matches start rolling round. But as I say, we'll keep an eye on our socials because we'll flag up the fact of what we're doing next week. But we'll probably look to do a live after the Harrogate game where we'll wrap up the next 2 friendlies, look ahead to Heerenveen. And then, like I say, we're up and running the week after that for the big opening game against Swansea. For now, though, thanks for watching. If you're watching us on YouTube, then please like and subscribe. It's massive help. Give us any comments. We do read them. We will feed them into the next vid. If you're listening on any of the podcast platforms, then rate and review. Let us know what you think. Enjoy your week. Enjoy yourself if you're off to Donny or Harrogate. And as I say, we'll catch up next week, and then we're heading into the season. But for now, thanks for watching. You are my Boro.